and welcome to another social advocacy series from Analytica and Tribal Impact. Today, Sarah and I are delighted to welcome Iain Brown from SAS. Thanks so much for joining us, Iain.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Tim. Hi, Sarah. Thank you for inviting me on today.
And Iain is the head of data science at SAS, an analytics firm that I'm sure lots of you will already know about. And you previously was a credit risk analyst and spent the last 10 years at SAS. And so Iain has actually featured in a lot of our analysis on how influential tech employees are. Actually, I think you were number one in big data and augmented analytics in a report that we did back in August 2020. 118,000 followers on Twitter, 32,000 followers, I think, on LinkedIn, driving sizable engagement. So we're really, really happy to have you to talk to us, Iain, and would love to hear, first of all, just a bit about your social media journey, like when it started, when the kind of breakthrough moments were, and how you amassed that wonderful engaged audience, which I suppose a lot of people are very impressed by.
Well, thank you, Tim. And as I say, it's taken some time. That didn't come about automatically or in a short period. And also, I'd like to say I'm quite lucky in the area I work. So I focus in on data science, as you mentioned, but I have an areas of interest in AI and in ethics and in the application of machine learning, which tend to be quite popular topics in this day and age. So these are areas that we find a lot of engagement in, a lot of interest in across all sectors. So I've been in this role at SAS for 10 years. I moved into more of a leadership role probably about 3 or 4 years ago. And during that transition, I felt there was a need to kind of have a voice in the market around these types of topics and to share the great work we do as an organization, my teams do as in their day-to-day work, and get that out there so people can see how AI is being utilized and how practically it can be used. So as part of that, I started to engage a bit more with the social channels. I think I started with LinkedIn, so I had probably quite a small number of connections at that point, most of those who worked in my own organization, which, again, I found quite quickly only gets you so far if the people that you sit next to are engaging with your content, and you might as well just tell them about it without going on social media. So I started to branch out a lot more and start to connect with those that were, let's say, either thought leaders themselves or influencers within the sector to see how they do this and to learn from those that are already doing it. And during that process, I started to reach out to a lot of people. I started to build a bit of a network around that, started to follow and attend more events and present at more events myself, and started to therefore generate some content that I thought was of interest and worth sharing. And I think it was a bit of a cyclical thing. So sharing more content, engaging with more people, so building a bit of an audience, and then creating a platform to share that over time has certainly helped build up the following that I now have. On the likes of Twitter, as you also mentioned, that's a much bigger following. I find that's a much bigger platform as well. There seems to be a lot more engagement on Twitter. I do treat that slightly differently, though. I find it's a bit more around a lot of content, and you're trying to stand out from others where there's lots of information being shared, and that's where things like hashtags make much more of a difference to trying to get into the news feeds of all of those that they're also using it as a platform. So I've adapted, I guess, my behaviors across those different social media platforms to try and cater for the different audiences and the different users of those platforms in terms of the information they're looking to hear and engage with, really.
So it sounds like a little bit like you never set out to become an influencer with thousands of followers. If I heard you right, it sounded like that when you first started on LinkedIn, you wanted to reach out to other people to learn, to network, to build your knowledge. Would that be correct? I mean,
yeah, you would be right in saying that. So I didn't look to kind of get a massive following, and I don't think anyone really should start with that as the goal in mind. It should be about creating and curating good quality content that those that you kind of work with, or those that are in your field, or those kind of on the outer edges of that area would be interested in. And I think content is key across all social media platforms, really, isn't it? Creating something interesting and engaging is the most important part of it. And you're right. So that's really what I started with, is how can I start to get something out there? But at the same time, it's, as I said, there's no point just sharing that if it's only going around a very small community. If you don't have a megaphone to shout this out that's going to break that, it just goes around a very small group, and you're not really breaking in, or not really making the most of what social media is there to do.
How long ago did you start that process then? Are we talking like a couple of years ago or several years ago? I mean, you know, I noticed you started on Twitter, I think it was 2012. Yep. So that was quite early.
So that sounds early, doesn't it? I think you're right. I probably did open my profile then. But if I look back, I probably didn't really use it until 2017, 2018. So I probably had tweeted 3 or 4 times during that period, because I didn't really understand the benefit of it, and 2, I didn't really know what I wanted to be known for, or what I wanted to share. I've obviously tweeted many, many more times since then, and part of that is curating what I find interesting content. So I have to admit, I do use some automation on things like Twitter to find articles of interest. I will curate those, look at things that are happening in the news around AI and NLP and deep learning and other relative disciplines, and then I share those out. So it's almost as though, which I was using actually before, my own news feed that I then find of interesting articles. So I only really started using it to do that more probably around 2018, and started to build a following at that time. So yeah, it's probably 3 years worth of effort. And I say effort because it is something you need to keep at. If you're just going to tweet once a month using Twitter, or only post one LinkedIn post a month, that's not really going to start breaking out and starting to get you engagement with those outside of your inner circle. So you need to start to think about a plan of what content you're going to share. Start to schedule content. I use scheduling tools like Hootsuite, if you're familiar with, to start to set up a routine of content that goes out. And as I said, although with Twitter, I do use it to tweet a lot, LinkedIn is very much more personalized, and they're all bespoke messages that I send maybe once or twice a week to get out content that's relevant to what we're doing currently, or things that are coming up in the near future.
Yeah, I love your story, and especially around that you built this following within 3 years, because a lot of people, I think, listening to this think, oh, yeah, this is 10 to 20 years, and you know, I could start, but I just, you know, I could never get there. Yep. But actually, what's obvious very, very early on is that you're very strategic, and you found some niche areas that you know that there's big communities around, and you've chosen to play there, and been very, very focused, and you've been able to achieve that in a relatively short space of time. I mean, 3 years is obviously a significant amount of time, but not in terms. I mean, some people have said I've been 20 years building this up, and actually, I would have thought that it would have been a lot longer. But that's really cool that it's been over a relatively short space of time.
I do think that, again, I can't take full credit for that. I obviously work with an organization that's very supportive of this, but also the topic areas, right? We've all heard about data science. We've all heard about how artificial intelligence is going to potentially take over in the future. These are interesting topics. These are engaging topics, and they're topics that break out from industry. They go into the public psyche in terms of things that people have heard about. Most of us have a voice command kit in our homes, whether you're using Alexa or Google products to do that. We're kind of getting more familiarized with it. So I've been lucky to be in an area that there is general interest in already. So sharing this content and being a voice in this area has been easier, I guess, than if you're trying to start from an area that is more niche. So again, my advice would be try and connect whatever topics that you're interested in or focused in into something that has broad appeal, something that others could gain benefit from, even if they're not working directly in that area, that they could still find an interest in it.
And you talk a little bit about Twitter and LinkedIn. Are you on any other platforms, or are they your primary platforms, social platforms?
Yeah, it's a good question, Sarah. They are my primary ones. I have tried others, to be honest, but not made as much headway.
Okay.
And I think these, from a business perspective, I think these work quite well. I think the structure of those two that we've called out there are kind of geared up to do that. And whether it's using LinkedIn and using kind of social events like we're doing now for live streaming on that platform, or doing tweet chats, which I get involved in quite regularly on the Twitter platform, they're almost designed to facilitate these kind of connections and these building these relationships, which is part of the goal I did this in the first place, was to branch out and to connect to more interesting people and understand their viewpoints. So yeah, these are the two I focused on for now. That's not to say I won't try others in the future as well.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, so we couldn't find you on TikTok creating lots of videos.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Or Instagram.
Maybe they're the next ones to go to. I think video content, imagery, it's not my strong suit. But they have their place, and they're obviously, from an influence perspective, extremely valuable sources as well. But not areas that I've had time to go into yet.
So would you say that you feel most comfortable in writing longer form content or curating short form content? I mean, where's your sweet spot?
Yeah, so it's a mix, and I think that's changed over time, Tim. I used to blog quite regularly. I still do, and write articles on certain topics of interest. But again, I think some of the short form content where you're trying to get across sometimes complex topics in a very easy and digestible form gets more engagement. It certainly has more interest, and is easier to generate quickly, right? So it takes less time to develop and to curate and to build. So I have had a mix over the years, and I still blog. I still use that as a platform to share. But again, it's the time, right? It's fitting this into your day job as well, because we all have day jobs and we're all doing other things. And I've tried to do this as an aside to what I do day to day, but certainly never letting it take a priority over what needs to be done day to day, but at least giving it the time that's necessity to kind of grow and to develop as well.
I'd like to explore a little bit on the tweet chats, please, because I don't think, Tim, we've had anyone who talks about tweet chats, and it sounds like you do them quite regularly. Do you host them, or are you guests on them? Can you talk through for the audience just a little bit about what that involves and why you find them so useful?
Yeah, certainly, Sarah. It's a bit of both, actually. So we, as an organization, we do run our own, and actually quite frequently, usually weekly, we will run a SAS chat, so a tweet chat on an engaging topic that we get influencers involved in, and then share this and schedule this so that it's content that people can follow along to, and then release some of the output from that afterwards as well. So it's a good way to collect information and collect insights into an easy to read form, but then creates almost the long form content on the back of it. So we do that. I've been involved in that for a few years now, but also guest support for other organizations and for those running their own tweet chats, and even those that I'm not asked to get involved in. If it's an interesting topic to myself, I will engage on, I will tweet about, and I will answer questions that are posed as part of it. And I think it's a really nice way, again, if you're looking to build up a network, if you're looking to build up or find like-minded individuals that are talking about the same topic, these are great ways to engage. They're great ways to share and to learn, because at the end of the day, those that are speaking about this typically have their own points of view, own perspective, and it may be different to your own, and you will learn something. So I typically learn quite a bit from engaging in these tweet chats about topics that, even if I have experience in, I don't obviously know everything about. So yeah, they're quite useful for that, Sarah.
I guess really... that. Oh yeah, go on, Tim.
Well, I just said it. I think it's really cool that you're actively driving an engagement model. You're also learning. You're having the community engagement, and the SAS team are repurposing that into longer form content. So it's like hitting 4 or 5 different cool tactics, like with a quite economical use of time, because it's 1 hour typically with a tweet chat.
And it's crowdsourcing, right? At the end of the day, you're asking the universe, or you're asking the Twitter universe, if it's a tweet chat, on their opinions on these topics. Now, of course, you don't get thousands of people necessarily contributing, but even if you get 1 or 2 or 10 that you wouldn't normally engage with sharing their opinion, you're creating a platform in itself of content around a particular topic. So they are good. Again, the risks of it are that you need to make sure others, or need to try and reach out beyond your own network to get engagement on this, and using hashtags and using relevant ones at least to broaden that reach is very important, because otherwise it's very easy to focus that down into just a small community. And what you really want with tweet chats is to get as a larger community as possible, following along, contributing along, and then sharing their valuable insights as well.
Yeah, I've just been thinking about that actually. Yeah, crowdsourcing content. And this, I think, is where, marketing teams need to be a bit more, they need to be a bit smarter about this, because we talk about user-generated content, employee-generated content, influencer, co-created content, but then actually crowdsourcing content and engaging insights from community, that's pretty cool, actually. That's efficient, it's smart, it's genuine voices, it's humans behind the content. I like that.
It's the wisdom of the crowds, right? It's getting that information from those around you. And obviously you need to have content to begin with. You need to have something to talk about or something to share. You need to have the audience, so participation. But if you can start to match those, and if you can bring to light some debatable topics, the topics that those will have an opinion, will voice opinion, I think it's a great source. It's a great source of more content and more engagement topics that could be created. And that's what you really want, right? Out of all of this is something that others will engage on. And if you've got a group of people contributing their own opinions, you're already getting that just in the creation phase.
Yeah. Love it.
I'd love to ask you about social audio. So what are the conversations internally, or your own personal opinion on Clubhouse, Twitter Spaces, the other platforms that are offering social audio? Is it something that you're going for, or just watching, or have you featured on there?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, Tim. It's not something I've actively engaged in so far. I've seen that others have started to do more of it, and I think it looks interesting. It looks a good way, again, a novel way to share. And certainly, obviously slightly different to this, but things like podcasts over the last few years have rapidly grown in terms of their the amount that's being generated, and also the engagement that people are getting. I find I engage better with podcasts, or I can listen to podcasts easier than I can read about a topic, because you can be doing other things and you can fit it into your day-to-day routine. So I think that side of it is growing, but it's also going to be a good way for thought leaders, for marketing agencies and marketing organizations to start to share content and start to engage on content.
Yeah, I also thought, you speak at a lot of events, don't you, Iain? You get invited to conferences, you speak at events. How does social support you at those events? Do you use social? Do you switch it off when you're there? Are you connecting with people on social and then ending up meeting them up in person? How does it work?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of mix of all of those, Sarah. I obviously try and make everyone aware of these events before they happen. Even if I'm not involved, if it's something I'm interested in, I will share that. But being at the event and engaging at the event and sharing content at the event, obviously it's harder to do now as well. It's not hard to do now as we're virtual, but you're not necessarily going to be taking any video or picture content when you're sitting at your desk. But those were good ways to start to share further engagement and to get an audience that are millions of miles away potentially, still involved in an event that's happening quite locally. So yes, in the past, a lot more so. Now on virtual events, I try and have a slightly different approach, and I might record a video or a bit of audio prior to the event happening, which can be shared on the social platforms, and then have a wrap up or content shared post event as a kind of a summary or a viewpoint on what was seen and what was covered. So it needs to almost wrap around those kind of focal points. And particularly with the kind of webinar fatigue that we all have experienced and gone through, I imagine, over the last 6 to 12 months, having other ways to engage on it without having to just sit through content and watch content is beneficial, I think, as well.
Yeah, chopping it up, making it a bit more accessible.
I'd love to ask a slightly different question around, like, what are your biggest successes? Like, what's been the kind of most proud moment, or like a major success to you, like either like personal or business wise, just from having a presence on social media?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I would say being involved in the online Analytica lists. So thank you for that, Tim, being part of those and voted before. But actually, and this is a personal one, building up a bigger audience. I actually have connected to a lot of different people at different levels of their career and stages of their career. And the engagements I get the most value out of is actually those right at the start that maybe are still at university or even before university, that now connect and will send messages asking about how they can progress, how can they be successful in data science, or what path should they follow. And without having the kind of the level of connections I have now, I got less of that, to be honest. It was maybe a couple of people. I now get lots and lots of people, and it's quite fulfilling to be able to share some of my perspectives and share some advice to those that are now looking for a career. I mean, you mentioned, Tim, that I've been at SAS 10 years, and before that I was a risk analyst, and before that I was still at university studying around the topics of statistics and operational research. I could never have imagined back then a career in data science. A career in data science didn't actually exist back then. In fact, I was a statistician before I was a data miner and then a data scientist. And who knows what I'll be in a few years' time. So being able to prepare yourself and share that with others that are developing their careers, I think is crucial. And this having a social media presence has certainly helped me engage more with those that are also looking to get a fulfilling career post academia and into industry.
I think that's a really interesting point, isn't it, Tim? Because we've spoken to Shoshana at Intel and another organisation as well. I can't remember the lady's name now, but they both got their first jobs in industry as a result of being active on social in a professional capacity on LinkedIn whilst they were still at university. So it's really interesting that you're getting people outreaching to you saying, how do I get into a career of data science? And I just find that whole thing fascinating that, university students, if they understood this, could actually get a career, before they even leave. So,
and that's part of the advice, Sarah, is actually get social, start to share a bit about what you're passionate around. And I think that's a differentiator nowadays. So those that are all at university, those that are either undergraduate or postgraduate, it is very competitive out there. And it is hard to differentiate yourselves, particularly where there's a lot of students looking for a career path. And I find using social media platforms, whether it's the standard ones we've talked about here, or using things like GitHub, for example, or Towards Data Science, or Medium, or other outlets where content can be shared, you need to build up a bit of a presence. And it actually helps you from a portfolio perspective, particularly in data science, if you can prove that you've done some work in this space before. And that nowadays, we actually look at that as part of the hiring process more and more, on top of people's or students' CVs and what they've achieved at university. So it's another arm to being successful and developing a career, is being able to showcase that and share that in a way that others can digest and can see and engage with.
Yeah, I think it's a massive point, and also I didn't notice until yesterday that we're fellow Southampton,
Oh, we?
Southampton
wow,
Uni,
there you go. Excellent,
in the south of England, for anyone not from England who don't know where Southampton is. But when I left university at 2001, we had no people really coming in to speak to us about, there was one person that was in inverted commas, successful businessmen that spoke to us, which we were very, very honored to have, and it was very motivating for us. But there was obviously no kind of social, path for us to take,
Yep.
or sort of any way in which we could prove what we were like before, like sending a CV
Yeah.
along with 4,000 other CVs to a graduate management program.
Yeah.
And I love what you're doing now. I mean, have you gone back to the university, or are you going to do you do some some talks or?
Yep. Yeah, so we do, Tim, and we have an academic outreach program that we run. In fact, one of the objectives for all of my team is to be linked to a university to kind of give that back, and also showcase what the world looks like outside of university, and where the applications of their knowledge can be applied, where they can start to look for roles and jobs, particularly obviously in data science. But I'm also lucky enough to still be linked to the university. So I actually am an adjunct professor at Southampton University. I still lecture. So I still teach a module on marketing analytics using data science techniques every year, which is really rewarding. And again, gives me that other perspective around the next generation, what they're looking for, the skills that they need. And obviously things like data literacy are so important now to understand and to know about throughout the academic process and into working careers. So yeah, being able to still be engaged I think it's important to give that back as well.
Amazing. No, I think that's a really cool point. It must be so fulfilling, because that's part of the. I think everyone's felt a bit weird especially over the past couple of years, that it's the kind of daily grind. But it must be very personally satisfying, like you said, to help the sort of next generations come through. It doesn't necessarily hit business targets per se, but it's part of the ecosystem.
Yeah, and it's all in the benefit of all of us, right? To support those that are going through any academic program, whether it's university level or before that, and to support with skills, because we're looking as a market, we need that. There's a shortage of data scientists out there, data engineers. It's something that as a country we need to focus more on, and we need those coming out of university to be building the skills that are required for it. So yeah, it's certainly something I engage with. I know all my team engage with as well, and it is very fulfilling to support that and to see those progress out of university into roles as well.
Fabulous idea. I'm off to university tonight, actually. Did you not think I was all a bit dressed up, Tim?
I did. I was going to ask Sarah, but I didn't want to say that you were dressed up, because you would say, no, it's my normal stuff. Like, what are you saying?
Did I normally look smart? Yeah, exactly. No, but I'm affiliated to the Portsmouth University. I didn't go there, but I do some sort of guest lecturing around marketing and things just for a bit of fun, but it is quite rewarding. But I love the idea of aligning the teams, local team members to theirs, which is great. Yeah, I wanted to ask a little bit about your most successful post, because you, like you said, you do a lot of content, you do video content, and I noticed actually a couple of your video pieces that you've done on LinkedIn, but you used to write long form content.
Yes.
What do you think your audience prefers? I mean, through all the data that you look at, what do you think they engage with best? For you, what works?
Yeah, and you're right. So as a data scientist, of course, I look at the numbers. Of course, I look at the data. So that is something I have looked at over the years, and it does vary. It varies from audience to audience, but I think the thing that stands out the most, and where I've had the most success in posts and I've got the most engagement on, the most comments on, is where I'm sharing my own perspective. So having my own point of view that's then being shared. And that doesn't need to be a long form post. It could be a short, sharp, interesting bit of insight. And I think some of the ones that I've written before around, for example, not needing to have advanced degrees in certain subjects to be successful. So not needing a PhD to be a data scientist, I wrote about a few years ago. It got a lot of traction and got a lot of interest, because others are out there looking today to understand where should they go and what do they need as skills to be successful in the future. So having a perspective and explaining why that's the case and standing by that, I find it gets the most engagement. Obviously, there are other posts that I try to do that are a bit more interactive. So as you mentioned, Sarah, having video posts, and they do pretty well. Obviously, I think that helps with the LinkedIn algorithm as long as you're keeping engagement within the platform. So sharing videos that are embedded, they work fairly well, I find. Anything that's linking outside of LinkedIn, though, tends to, again, I don't know if that's the algorithm or not, but that does tend to get less of an engagement. So sharing stuff within the platform that you're wishing to share to tends to get a bit more of an engagement and a bit more interaction. And I certainly have found over the years that the way in which I post, when I post, the time of day I post does make a difference. I typically now stick to Tuesdays and Thursdays on LinkedIn, usually just before lunchtime, seems to get the most traction if you look at the data. But it's the tips and hints.
So you mean 11 a.m. GMT?
Yeah, GMT time. Again, this will depend upon your audience, though, right? So if you've got predominantly a North American audience, that time needs to be equivalent there, and the same with APAC or wherever you're sharing to. But in a UK perspective, yeah, certainly just before lunch on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I think we will find that period of time of the week where we might be distracted or might be checking the social channels. That seems to work quite well. And then obviously on Twitter, it's different, but a lot more content spread out throughout the day. And as I said, I try and curate RSS feeds, so feeds of news articles, and post those out more regularly. But again, that's for my own benefit as much as anyone else's, because I will then check my own Twitter feed and utilize that for content and understanding what's going on generally outside of my sphere of influence as well.
No, I'd love to understand, since you're obviously extremely analytical and you're getting successful engagement, could you just talk us through a bit about how many topics you focus on, which are the hashtags?
Yep.
Some people have a strategy to do, I'm just going to post when I want, but it seems that you're quite strategic and disciplined in how you do it. It'd be great to understand, like, your kind of routine and the kind of parameters that you use.
Yeah, I think on that, Tim, and I kind of referred to at the start, right, that I wanted to have a voice in a certain area, and I think I've stuck to that. So artificial intelligence is probably the topic, as well as things like big data, are the two main topics that I focus on. I have changed over the years as I've developed myself and as I've focused on other areas, to things like responsible AI and AI ethics now is an area that I'm extremely passionate about, and an area that we're doing a lot of research and support into. So it's all around the same sphere, but I try and keep all the content I share related to that, so that, again, from an audience perspective, they know what they're getting. If they follow me, they're going to get stuff that's related to AI, related to big data, related to ethics, and that's it. I think anything more than that, it can be a confusing message. So having 100 hashtags about different topics compared to maybe 3 or 4 about a specific topic, I personally find that's better. And that's the way I've treated my platform, is to try and focus in on those specific topics, and then try and build a bit of a following around that, so that those that do follow me on LinkedIn or do follow me on Twitter know that that's what they're going to get. And it's kind of a clear offering in terms of what my area of expertise and thought leadership are in.
And are you... Sorry, Sarah. I was just quickly on that. Do you do analytics into the size of hashtag communities around hashtag AI or hashtag artificial intelligence, and which one is bigger on LinkedIn versus Twitter, and the combination of hashtags to be able to access like hundreds of thousands on one particular hashtag, and then like a deep dive? Like, is that all part of your psyche when you're...
It is a little bit, Tim. I have to say, I did look at it more a few years ago, and now I've just fallen into a bit of a routine. So whether it's as applicable as it was then, I'm not sure. But obviously, hashtag AI, hashtag data science, hashtag big data are all well followed topic areas and do get a lot of engagement. There are others as well, though, that I found. And again, Twitter is different. I find Twitter, there are automation that others use as well that will engage with certain topics automatically. So I have found that if you include certain hashtags, robots, for example, or IoT in tweets, they will automatically get engagement. Now, whether that's playing to the system or not, I still think if you're going to break out and get more engagement, it's worth including some of those. So whether or not they're the most topical, they're still relevant, and there's still areas that others are engaging on. So I do, with LinkedIn, try and be more specific to those, as I mentioned, around AI and big data and data science. I go a little bit further with Twitter, but that's more to reach a wider audience and get engagement from a wider audience as well. It's something I probably should look into a bit more, because that does change over time in terms of interest and patterns. But again, whatever works and adapting that is advisable if you're wanting to increase your engagement levels and your following.
I love your laser focused approach, though. You own the topic, you own the niche, and that's how you get on the lists, right? Because you're clear about what you stand for and what your message is. I did have to smile though when you said about AI ethics, because I watched that video about your barber saying, Alexa's like listening to everything, and the government's going to be they know everything about me.
Yeah, that's the perception though, right, Sarah? And it's a perception that we need to be careful with. I think I'm an AI optimist, but there is a lot of bad press out there, and I think in some cases for good reason. I think sometimes it's not well defined, and it's not well described, and it's not as transparent as it should be. And that's something, it's on all of us, not just those who are in the world of development, but those as members of the public. We should be challenging more what AI is being used for and how it's being deployed. And that's something I'm very passionate about, obviously, and an area that I do speak a lot. And so I've talked about, and I posted a long form post during the year around having a Hippocratic oath for data science. I called it the Datacratic oath, but it's having a set of oaths or set of rules that we abide by in terms of developing and applying these algorithmic approaches. And I think that's something that we will see more and more over time, and whether that's regulated or whether that's brought through by the communities, I think it's a very important thing to have. And it's something that social advocacy and using these platforms to talk about is an important thing to do.
Well, it kind of freaked me out. I mean, it's not at all like the government spying on me, but I was moaning at the kids the other day for taking all my pegs and building a tent in the living room. And then the next thing on Amazon, it's suggesting that I buy some pegs. So, I mean, something's going on, isn't it? I know it's not to do with the government, but I'm kind of thinking, that did freak me. I have to say, though, Iain, one thing I did want to say, you've got a family. How on earth do you find time for all of this? How do you find the time? What's your routine? Because people will be watching this thinking, how do you fit it in?
Yeah, it's difficult, I have to admit, but also having done research before I went into industry and completing a doctorate and then writing a book previously, I've got into a pattern of finding time and dedicating time in the day, whether it's 9 till 10 p.m. in the evening or whenever, to focus on other things and to do other things. And I do fit this into that. So as I do schedule posts, so I do come up with content throughout the week, and I'll put that to one side and put it into an almost orchestration engine to make sure that they get sent out. There's a lot of support from the organization that I work for as well. We have our own digital spearhead program, and there is time allocated to be able to do things like this. So again, having a supportive organization is important as well. And as I say, I'm not a marketing expert myself, but I try and convey the messages that we, from a marketing perspective, we want shared. So I feel as though I'm a voice in that space, but it's not by any means my core day-to-day activity. It's something that is done alongside what I do day to day.
I think it's interesting that you say that you're not a marketing expert, because I think what's great about it is you obviously are a kind of a natural marketer without trying to think through what marketing is about, because it's just the normal way of you communicating with the community, which is actually what Sarah and I feel is one of the most effective forms of marketing anyway. So it's great, because I think I've lost what the definition of marketing actually is over the decades, because everything's sort of merging into one. So so it's
nice
actually,
to say, Tim. It's nice if data science doesn't work out, it sounds like I've got a career in marketing that I can go to.
Yeah, I think what we've found in common, especially doing this series, which Sarah and I love, is passion, energy about the topics, and connecting with community, and that's what everyone's got in common. Where
Yeah.
people differ is some people are very strategic. Some people like shoot from the hip and just create content as and when they want to. Some people schedule. Some people don't. That's where it differs, I think, and the actual personal successes. But everyone's passionate and has an energy about the community, and that's definitely the kind of intrinsic value that everyone provides.
I think I'd agree with it, Tim. I think you need to be passionate as well for this. As I say, there is a commitment there. If you do want to grow a platform, if you do want to grow the engagement, you've got to be passionate about it. It's got to be a topic you care about, because if it's not, you're not going to be engaged yourself, and you're going to struggle to keep up with that and to share content consistently. So having consistency with it, having a passion for it is crucial. And I'm lucky for that, because that, as I say, the topics I talk about are inbuilt or embedded in me, and these are things that I talk day to day to organizations about anyway. So I am keen to share about it and share my ideas, my thoughts on these as well.
Sorry, go for it, Sarah.
No, I was just going to say to you, Tim, I think that is the bit, though, isn't it, Tim, that people struggle with, because employees can't get over that. They don't quite know what it is that they are passionate about. And I think, you're absolutely right. The common thread through all of these, Tim, has been, they love their topic, they love what they do, and it just comes across, and they don't have to work hard at it. It just comes naturally. So that's all I was just going to comment on.
Yeah, no, I think that's really cool. It's just really cool to see. Iain, how have you inspired other exec leaders that are maybe social cynics or don't have as much time on social, but are kind of wanting to get there? How do you, what advice do you give them, or have you got an example of where you've helped someone kind of break through?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say I do advise day to day on that, Tim. It's something that, as I say, I'm passionate about, but if people are interested in it, it's up to them. I think what I would say, though, is you've got to have a reason to do it. There's got to be a perspective that you want to use it for. As I said, up until recently, I didn't use social media. I probably was a cynic myself. Sarah, you quite rightly pointed out, I've had a Twitter account for almost 10 years and only really actively use that for 3 of those, so 30% of that time. I didn't see the need at the time. I didn't feel as though it was something that I had an opinion to share, or opinion that was worthwhile sharing. And obviously what's changed as I focused in and I've decided this is an area that I want to be known for, I want to talk about, and that's driven me to do this. So for those that are interested, and everybody has their own specializations, their own focus areas, and their own passions, if you have something that you want to talk about, or you want to share, or you think others could benefit from, then doing something like this is a perfect avenue for that. But I think that needs to come first. You need to make that decision first before then engaging. And otherwise, as I say, you've got to have that commitment there. You've got to be doing consistently. I've been doing this now for 3 years, but it's been a consistent thing. I haven't dipped out of that during that period. It's been a building process throughout. And I will continue to do that. And it's something I will continue to be passionate about. But you've got to have a bit of commitment there to decide to do it, and then have something to talk about as well.
What would you say, Iain? Because I think there are, I've certainly come across folks that have said, especially technical people that have got, value, thought leadership, they understand the subject matter area really closely, but they don't want to give that knowledge away, because they kind of feel like, if I'm giving away that knowledge, that doesn't make me special. Where does my value go? What would you say to that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I guess people see things from different perspectives. I like to coach, I like to mentor, I like to share what I know. I don't feel what I know is anything necessarily special, but at the same time, I'd rather empower others with that knowledge than hold it to myself. But again, that's a personal thing, right? You've got to be comfortable with what you're sharing, and I have lines. I don't share everything I do, and all of the intrinsic things that I've picked up or worked on or been involved in development of. Not all of that's content that I would want to share. But it's working out where you draw that line, working out what you think others could benefit from, and what are you prepared to share to others is going to be the kind of the deciding point with that. And I apply that inside, outside of work as well. These are things, if it's something I'm really interested about and I want others to also be interested or passionate about, I will share it. So that's the way I kind of make that decision, Sarah, with the stuff I have and I share online.
Okay.
Now, I've got a very specific question around creating content with external influencers.
Okay,
so
yeah.
Do you, because you built up your community, and I think what was really telling at the beginning was saying that LinkedIn, SaaS employees, is wonderful, but it only gets you so far. It's about speaking outside of the echo chamber that is your own organization. So now that you've got an extensive network of external influencers and thought leaders,
yes,
how do you co-create content with them?
Yeah, so I think to start with on that, Tim, it was engaging with them. So there were a number of influencers already in the space of data science and AI. And to begin with, I would start retweeting, liking, commenting, sharing their content first. So it's starting to build up a bit of a digital relationship, I guess, with those thought leaders. And then as my profile's raised and as I've got a bit of a following, it kind of gives you the remit to do things together. Now, I can't admit to going out there and asking other thought leaders to engage, but we end up crossing paths more often than not on content creation. And whether that's doing things like tweet chats or whether that's engaging on corporate events, which are other aspects of what we do, you start to build up more of a relationship there. And there will likely be avenues to explore further down the line then, to co-create or to work together on. But I think it's initially starting to build up a mutual benefit of where you're sharing and they're sharing, and then there's a crossroads in terms of where those two topics combine. And that's really how I started to build those relationships early on, 2 or 3 years ago, with those that are already specialists, already experts in the field. And people like, I don't know if you know Kirk Bourne or Ronald Van Loon, these are other experts about big data and AI. And I've had the privilege to actually meet a couple of both of those before. So you end up then crossing paths physically at events as well. So it's trying to build up a bit of a network internally and externally around these topics that you can share alongside.
I love that. Just taking your words, like almost getting on the radar, digital relationship, and then you're on that peer-to-peer level, and then there's the mutual benefit, and then there's the just natural opportunity which comes. I love that. I love that journey, because that's awesome.
Yeah, and you got to earn that, right? Because 3 years ago, from a digital perspective, I was nobody. I was just another user of LinkedIn and a barely user of Twitter. So you've got to start to show your true colors in terms of what you're about, what you know, what you can share as well. And everyone starts somewhere, and it's just getting going and trying things and failing. And as I have found, and we've talked about the benefits and what's worked, but obviously a lot of things didn't work during those 3 years, and it's learning from those mistakes and trying to find a golden path, as it were, to how you share content and how best to do it. And failing fast is an important aspect of achieving and succeeding in that.
I'm curious now, what didn't work? But that's putting you on the spot, and you probably can't remember.
No, it's a good question, Sarah. I think I tried a lot to begin with, and we've talked about me being laser focused. I to begin with, it was a bit more broad, actually. It was trying to hit too many bases at once and trying to cater for all, and coming up with a different topic each week almost. And that's, I quickly learned that wasn't the way forward. And also the way in which I was engaging and writing lots of very detailed, in-depth articles or sharing really in-depth content. Again, it's not always the best way to go. People want things that they can pick up, they can digest fairly rapidly, particularly within the social platform. You don't want people don't have time necessarily to engage in all of the long form content. So it's learnings and lessons like that, Sarah, that I've changed my behavior, and I've started to adapt more to what the audience want to hear about, as opposed to what I want to do.
Yeah.
I think those are two really good pieces of advice. Stay true to your subjects, and produce of snackable, engaging content. I think that's great. And we used to see, from doing the analytics of a lot of social media influencers, some people using 20 different hashtags on every single post. And I think one thing that you said, which is really interesting, is be aware of the ones where some of the robots pick them up to drive the engagement model, maybe in the first 10 minutes of your post, to just give it a bit of a lift, but don't automate hashtags to be too broad. Like there's a very fine balance.
Yeah, and it's a balance you need to strike as early as possible as well, because as I've referred to, if you do go too broad, you don't then get the audience that you want, or the audience that are going to engage in those topics longer term. You might get a quick win to begin with, but it's something that you play the longer game for, and you want to build up that audience. You want to build up those that will follow and retain that audience as well, right? We talk about followers, but churn within followers is a thing to be conscious of. That if you start changing what you're talking about, you might bring in new people, but you might lose some of those that have been there before. So yeah, I'd say that's an important aspect of it.
Honestly, Iain, I think your journey is incredible, just in 3 years as well. And it's very considered, and you didn't set out to become a major influencer, but it's helped your career, it's helped you learn. Now you're helping others. So it's a fascinating journey, I think. So
yeah, no, thank you
for sharing
it. Shows that anyone can do it, and also it doesn't take 20 years to do so. So I think, if anything, and I do within my own organization, others are now doing this as well. So it's something once you kind of decide what you want to do, what you want to be known for, and what you want to talk about and focus on, there's nothing stopping anyone doing this as well.
Well, I think it's been very inspirational, and hopefully we'll see lots of data science, social media aficionados in the coming year. I know that there's a lot already, but we'll see more and more.
I'll be even happier if there are, because I would say this is content I digest myself. So the more the merrier, I would say.
Oh, that's true community spirit there, isn't it? That is, love that, Iain.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Iain. We're beyond our normal 45 minutes, but we could just keep on talking. So
it's been a really nice conversation. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Tim, for inviting me on this week.
It was a pleasure.
It's really
if you would like to see any more resources for Tribal or Analytica, please go to our website, and under the resources section, you'll see lots of other social advocacy videos on other influential experts that have also shared their journey with us. So thank you again to Iain, and thanks for tuning in.
Cheers, Iain. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Goodbye. Bye.